Alright, I made this video to go along with all the other videos that have been made about painting your 370Z headlights. So I'm not going to go over some of the stuff that they went through. You can just check out those videos for it, like taking off the bumper and taking the headlights out. There's videos that shows all of that. I'm going to go into detail a little bit more about some of the inner workings, so that way it can make you a little less scared to do so. And this is the disassembly. This is actually the assembly after I painted them, but just do this in reverse. Alright, these are the screws that hold on your lens. There's about, I don't know, 7 of them maybe. The ones on the outside there. That's what holds your lens on. So after you melt the glue holding it on, those screws can keep it in if you don't take them out. So take all those screws out. I left all of the ballast inside of it. I just took the bulbs out and I put the plugs back in to the headlight assembly. So these little clips hold your headlight bulb in. What you do is you'll push, if you look at how they're attached in there, you push it in and you move it to the side and then it pulls out. You have to do that to each side. There's little notches on the end of your headlight bulb. You have to line that up with the notches on the headlight. Put it in there and it screws to the right, like a quarter turn to the right. Or actually it might just sit in there. And then you push those wires back down and make sure they go back into the notches, the grooves that and that holds it in there. Now that metal piece, that lines up with the notches on the headlight and that holds it in. So you push that in, give it a quarter turn to the right. That plastic piece gets pushed in, quarter turn to the right, and that's put back in there. This little clip, it'll come off when you pull one of the screws off. It kind of helps line up your headlight, I believe. So don't lose it. Just put it to the side. There's a little R for the right and a little L marked on it for the left. But if you put everything where you got it, when you disassemble it, everything should be with the right headlight. Also, all the screws, you want to mark where they go because some of them are a little bit longer than the others. And of course you don't want to touch the bulbs with your bare fingers. You'll get your oils on them and make them go out a lot quicker. So you use gloves and just try to touch them as least as possible. Those do a quarter turn to come out and go back in. When you push the headlight back in, you want to make sure it clicks, like it gets pushed in there pretty hard. If you don't push it in all the way, you'll have to pull your headlight all the way back out just to put your headlight bulb back in there, which is a pain in the butt, and I had to do it. Hit the club from the back. I don't do no metal check from here to my OC niggas in Frisco. Boy, I rep the Jets. Run the option quick if the plane. So after watching all the other videos, I basically did the same thing as everyone else. Wet paper towel or wet towel wrung out all the way to line the bottom to keep the bottom from getting too hot. And you want to test fit it to make, because that headlight goes to the very front of that cookie sheet, because it barely fits in there. So you want to test fit it so you can get the headlight exactly where it needs to be on the cookie sheet. So when you have your oven hot and you put it back in there, you're not messing around with that too much. And watch your glass, make sure it's not touching the front of your lens, make sure nothing's touching around the edges. And I put this in for 14 minutes at 245. And that's to take it apart and put it back together. So after it's done, take it out. Have some gloves that can help pull it apart, setting off to the side, because you want to work on it pretty quick while the glue's still soft. I left the sound on this so you can hear what it sounds like when you're pulling it apart. It has some popping noises, which is fine. That's just what it sounds like. It takes a little bit. Now when you're pulling, if it's pulling apart, if it's coming apart, that's good. If it's not moving at all, then you have to put it back in the oven more. But you shouldn't have to. If you're pulling it and it's slowly pulling apart, then that's what you're looking for. Again, if it sits there too long, it'll harden back up and it won't pull apart at all when you're pulling on it. That's when you know it needs to go back in the oven for a few minutes. This is just a shot of the inside of the headlight, because I know some of you guys wanting to replace that little ball lens in there, so you can see how you would go about doing that. And this is separating the inner chrome bezel from the actual lens, the outer lens. So there's some screws that hold in the orange side markers. There's some screws that hold in that. There's a little clear piece in there too. So you just gotta take all the screws out, and like I said, mark them, because some of them are longer than the others. I'm using a drill, but you might use a screwdriver if you don't know how to use a drill. These are the clear pieces and the little circle pieces that come out with screws. Just remember, mark where the screws go. This is what it looks like on the inside. And this is the chrome bezel, all disassembled. Everything's off of it. And I'm going to sand it down, lightly scuff it with the gray Scotch-Brite. Kind of help the paint stick. On this part, I masked off some of the chrome on the boomerang part. But I really don't recommend this because it will pull that chrome off. It's such a thin layer and it's like barely on there. So some of the chrome did get pulled off when I pulled the tape off. Now when you spray paint, I'm using, I'll take a picture of what I was using, but basically you don't let go of the button, you just spray back and forth, overlap 50%, light coats, like 3 light coats, and then like a kind of a medium, almost like a medium wet coat at the end. I painted my boomerang white, that's why I masked off that little chrome trim piece, and this is me putting it back together, screwing all the little pieces back into the headlight. This is after it's all assembled. I put some little bit of graffiti on the inside with a chrome marker, and it was kind of an experiment. I didn't know if it would stay or if it would mess everything up, but I just went ahead and did it, and it worked out just fine. After I painted the headlight and assembled it, I let it dry for, I don't know, a few hours, and then I set it out in the sun for it to kind of bake on there a little bit for a few hours, kind of help it dry all the way, and then I set it aside for till the next day. So a good 24 hours with it cooking in the sun for a few hours, just to make sure that it's totally dry, cured all the way. And this is the headlight before I put the lens back on. It's just showing that channel where the butyl has to go. And this is 3M, I think it's called butyl tape. You can get it from some O'Reilly's, and I'm kind of stretching it to make it a little bit thinner. It's 1/4 inch, and it's a little on the thick side, so you kind of don't, they say you kind of don't need it, but I went ahead and got it anyway just to be safe. So I stretched it out to make it a little thinner. and then you just put it in that channel real good, and you can see where it kind of might need a little bit more, and you'll see me put a layer through the whole channel, and then you'll see me add another few pieces in certain areas where it looks like it might not have enough glue in there. And putting the lens back on there, make sure it's in there right. It kind of slides in a certain direction. It doesn't go just straight on. It kind of slides into one of the corners. So I just pushed it in as good as I could and pushed down so it'll basically get in there. So when it's in the oven, it's getting pushed right into where it's got to go anyway.
Used to be dumping that sauce, stay with the pepper on me. Shit, a brand new Glock 40, homie, I kept it on me. Knocked down 120, cause cuz was telling on me. Came back and took over my city, man, they was slapping on me. Grabbing Habricks and Ninas, the homie chefed it for me. Shit, I learned to whip it.
Now this is the wet towel that's been wrung out real good, lining the cookie sheet. My headlight is very oxidized, that's why it looks like that on top.
The back it feel like a station on me. Can tell I'm Tom and check out how the mule resting on me. Rarely talks to his useless asking me questions, homie. Check my paperwork, I ain't us, ain't no confessions on me. My pockets so precious, thicker than Texas, homie. Half 100.
Again, make sure it fits in there just right. Don't want to touch anything. 14 minutes. 2:45. And take it out. Put your gloves on. And just squeeze it to where it gets pushed right back in where it came from, basically.
All about the G's when I move the units like 50, y'all. B.A. Baracas, you niggas fools, so I pity y'all. Fell in love with LA, but ain't nothing like Killer City, y'all. The charger on 4G's bigger than Wendy's, bro. Shit, that house in Olathe look like a mini mall. I'm way out in Jamaica blowing with Ziggy. I fuck on Caucasian bitches that thick as Ziggy and Britney are. Blow back was a shit as loud as the IndyCar. The floor is super max US.
Now you can see on the edge there, it's all tight back where it came from. And then you want to put the screws immediately back in there, because when you're putting those screws in, it's also pulling that lens closer in there and creating a seal. When you're screwing those screws in there, you'll hear it pop because it's the kind of the air getting popped out. So while it's still warm, right after you squeeze it real good for a couple minutes, put your screws back in, because that'll pull it in even further. Now to remove all that oxidation, I got the 3M headlight kit, and instead of using the tool that came with it, I just did it by hand. Well, wet sanded it basically with some dishwashing liquid and sanding it sideways with your hand. You don't want to put your finger grooves in there, you want to go sideways with it. And I just had a wet paper towel with soap on it, and then I would sand it with the coarser stuff first, of course. Do it a whole lot until it's nice and flat, and then get the finer, they have a finer grit in there also. Do the same thing with the finer grit that gets out all the coarser grit scratches. And this is what it should look like after it's sanded. It'll look clear when it's wet, and then when it dries, it has that fog look over it, and that's why it needs to be clear coated. So I'm taking a tack cloth, which you can get at O'Reilly's. It's just like a sticky cheesecloth almost. Gets any dust or little things off of it.
Niggas say they be getting it paper lighter than Drake is. Harvard tuition chain on my neck like this is what cake is. Got hoes in my stable, bigger than shaky. They keep daddy with bands in his pocket.
I got this clear coat at a automotive paint shop. It has a little red plunger that you push in and it bursts like it's something on the inside that activates the clear. Just a little bit better of a clear. I also put like a plastic primer on the outside. Probably like 2 medium coats and then a nice wet coat without making it too heavy. Then you let that dry for a day. Again, I let it dry for a few hours inside the house or in the shade, and then set it outside for a few hours so it can kind of cook real good, and then left it back in the house overnight. And then that way when you're trying to put them back in, you're not worried about putting fingerprint marks and indentions in your fresh clear coat.
Gassing them mobbing low, that's what I'm about. I'm throwing strikes when I cock it back, send them down and out. Don't get nicked with the cannon, we call that grounding out. And I ain't telling jokes on them TV too when I'm wilding out. Hit the club from the back, I don't do no metal check. From here to my OC niggas in Frisco, boy, I rep the Jets. Run the option quick if the plane develop. Yeah, the Kansas City Chief with my hoodie on like I'm Belichick. Hit the club from the back, I don't do no metal check. From here to my OC niggas in Frisco, boy, I rep the Jets. Run the option quick if the plane develop. Yeah, the Kansas City Chief with my hoodie on like I'm Belichick. I make bitches follow me like a Twitter link. 80 stacks make the Hummer sit on gorilla feet. 80 racks on the bomber, bitch, this gorilla mink. That 1980s crack made a monster up out of Dynasty. 120, I ain't get no clemency. Hell yeah, I snatched the deal cause the government tried to finish me. Now I'm back throwing words around like a ministry. Follow me on IG, congregation the size of Tennessee. No Hennessy, rarely smoke, but I keep